Hey everyone! In this video I'm going to show you how to make a properly formatted scientific figure. To get us started, let's make sure that we're all on the same page. Look at the bottom of your worksheet and make sure that you've selected the figure practice worksheet, and you should be in the Excel tutorial practice data file that was posted up on Canvas. If you can see that those two things are correct, then you're in the right place. The next thing I wanted to do was get you oriented to the data that's shown in this worksheet. So you'll notice over here in column A, I have subjects. So for this particular data set, I had 7 participants or subjects who are included in the data. For each of those participants, I collected heart rate values, which are shown in column B, and measured stroke volume. Those data are shown in column C. So each subject has a heart rate value and a stroke volume value. So I'm going to show you how to make a figure that shows us the relationship between heart rates and stroke volumes. So to get started, I need you to click in any empty square or any empty cell on this spreadsheet. Once you have an empty cell selected, you're going to go to the Insert tab up at the top and then click on the down arrow next to the Scatter button. And within that drop-down menu, you want to select the Scatter Plot feature. So this is a symbol that's going to have a bunch of dots with no lines. Once you select that, you should see a big white empty rectangle with nothing in it. The next step for us is going to be to tell Excel what we want to appear in that scatter plot. So first you want to click on the white rectangle. That will open the chart design menu up here at the top. You might have to click on chart design if it didn't automatically open. And then you're going to click on the select data button. That's going to allow you to tell Excel what your X values are and what your Y values are. So once that pop-up window has opened, you will click Add to add a series, and then you'll click on this little button at the end of the series X values box. Once you've clicked on that, you'll come over to your data, and for this particular scatter plot that we're making, we want our X values to be our heart rate values. So I'm going to click in the middle of the cell for 55 and drag down to 72. Once I've got those 7 cells selected, I'll hit enter on my keyboard, and that will bring up the edit series window again. Now I need to tell Excel what I want the Y values to be for my scatter plot. So this time I'm going to click on this little button next to the series Y values box. And after I've done that, I want to make sure that this equals parentheses 1 thing is highlighted. It usually is by default. And then I'm going to select my stroke volume numbers. So I'm going to click in the middle of the box for 76.8, and without letting go, drag down to 65.5. Once I have those 7 cells selected, I will hit enter on my keyboard, and that will bring me back to the edit series box. I'm going to leave the series name empty. If you had multiple series, then you might want to fill that in because it would create a legend, but we just have 1 series of information. So we're going to leave it blank, and then we're going to click OK. On the Select Data Source window that opens, we're going to click OK again. And now you have a figure that has some lines, it has some dots, and it has some numbers, and it has some letters. Now we're going to kind of mess around with this and make it look pretty. So the first thing that you'll notice is that most of the data for this figure are crammed over here into this top right-hand corner. If you were publishing a figure in a real scientific journal, you would want to make sure that your origin is 0, 0, just like it is in here. But since we're doing this more for educational purposes, I want to ignore that rule for this class. And we're going to try to spread out our axes so that our data are more spread out. And that'll help your instructor see what your data are. So in order to do that, we are going to right click on any of the numbers on our x-axis. And then we're going to go down to Format Axis. And on the window on the side that opens here, we are going to set our minimum to something that is slightly lower than our lowest x value. So the lowest x value here looks like it is around 55 or so. So I'm going to say maybe 50 would be a good minimum. And then we also want to adjust our maximum. So the maximum x value here is around 72 or 73. So I'll say maybe we want 80 to be our new maximum. And so now you can see that our data over here on our figure are spread across most of the way of the figure. But we still have our data crammed up at the top of our figure. So we're going to fix that next by right-clicking on one of our y values and selecting Format Axis again. So we'll set our minimum first. The minimum here looks like it's around mid-60s or so. So I'll say maybe pick 50 again for my minimum. And then the maximum value looks like it's really, really, really close to 80. So maybe I'll pick 85 as my maximum to kind of see what things look like. And so things look like they're spread out pretty well, so I'll leave it like that for now. You'll also notice that we're increasing by 5s as we go across. So 50, 55, 60, 65. Here we have 50, 55, 60, 65 also, and it's good to kind of have our markings spread out evenly. One of the other things that you could do if it didn't work out like that already is you could change your major or minor units, but we won't worry about that right now because I kind of like how things look. But that's something that you can play with in your own time. So now we have a good spread across our x-axis and a good spread across our y-axis. So another thing that we need to add to our properly formatted figure is a label for what these x values are. Remember I said that we were adding heart rates here. We need to actually make the figure say that. So we'll go up to the top, click on Add Chart Element, and we're going to pick the primary horizontal axis title. And we're going to type in heart rate. And then we always want to include units as well, so heart rate in BPM. Next thing that we need to do is add a label for our y values. So again, we're going to go to Add Chart Element, go to Axis Titles, and this time we'll pick Primary Vertical. So these values right here were stroke volume. So I'm going to type out stroke volume. And then we always need to add units. The units for my stroke volume were mil per beat. So ml per BEAT. Now I have my label for my y-axis. I also need to include a title for my figure. And so when we're labeling our figures, they should always start with the word figure. And that word should then be followed by a space and then a number. So this is the first figure that I'm making. So this is figure 1. And then I'm going to add a colon after that and another space. After that, you need to write some sort of description of what your figure is. So because I'm doing a scatter plot, I'm looking at a relationship between two variables. So I want my figure to start with the word, or my figure title to start with the word relationship. And this is something that's specific to scatter plots. If you were doing a different type of figure, like maybe a bar graph or a line graph, you might not want to start with the word relationship because that wouldn't be appropriate. But since this is a scatter plot, we'll start with relationship between, and my two variables are heart rate and stroke volume. Okay. So the next thing that we need to do is get rid of these lines. So we mentioned in the table video that we don't like to have a bunch of lines. We don't like to have lines in our figures either. They make things kind of messy and they can also be expensive to print. So to get rid of the lines, you click on one of the lines that you want to get rid of just one time, and that'll make these light blue dots appear at the end. When you see those light blue dots, you can just hit the delete button on your keyboard and that will make them go away. So my vertical lines are now gone. I'm going to do the same thing to get rid of my horizontal lines. So I click on one of the lines one time until the light blue dots appear at the end, and then I hit delete. And now they're gone. So now I have a nice clean empty table with nothing in it. The next thing that I need to add is a trend line to show what the relationship actually is. So how do all of my data fit together? To show a trend line, you need to right click on one of the data points and then click on add trend line. When you do that, it will pull up a format trend line at the bottom or on the right hand side of your screen. And we want to say that we have a linear trend line, so you want to make sure that that button is clicked. And then you want to scroll down in this menu and select display equation on chart. So that tells you what the relationship actually is, and you can use this equation to predict what somebody's stroke volume might be if they have a particular heart rate. So that equation is a really important part of a scatter plot. You also want to click on display R-squared value on chart. The R-squared value gives us an idea of how well the data fit the equation that you got, or how close the points are to the line that's shown. For whatever reason, when Excel puts this equation and this R-squared value onto the figure, it always puts it directly on the line. And so you might have noticed that I just kind of clicked on the box and dragged it out of the way. That's something that you should do. It helps your reader see the data and the trend line more clearly. The last thing that we want to do when we are formatting our figure is to make sure that the font is consistent and that the size of the figure and the size of the font is correct. So we're going to go back to Home, and I want to change the font for everything in this figure to be Calibri again, and I want to change the font size to be 11 again. So just like the font was for the table video. For whatever reason, you can't just click on the figure and say Calibri 11. It won't change it for everything, it'll just change it for some things. So you have to actually click on every place where there is a number or letters and change things one by one. So I like to start at the top with the table title or figure title and change that first. Then I go to whatever's next. Change that. So you really have to do everything one by one. And then the last thing is the equation in r squared. Okay. And so now that all of my fonts are the same and they're all the same size, I want to change my figure size. So I'm going to make sure that my figure is clicked on. I'm going to go up to Format at the top. And over here, I want to make sure that my figure is 3 inches high. So make sure that says 3. And I want my figure to be 5 inches wide. Make sure that says 5. And that is how you make a properly formatted figure.